Baroque and Enlightened art. What do we have here? One of the most famous paintings in world history, Las Meninas, or Ladies in Waiting, by Diego Velázquez, a Spanish Baroque painter who lived between 1599 and 1660, just at the moment of the power, the prowess, the importance of Spain in the world as the first world power. Las Meninas represents a moment at the court of Philip IV, the court of Spain, with the princess in the middle, where the character central to the painting itself, the young Infanta, is looking at us. But not only her, there's also the painter, presumably Velázquez, and other characters, the dwarfs, the ladies around the princess, and at the end of the room we see a door with someone standing there, and also a mirror with two characters, presumably the king and the queen. So, who is looking at whom? Are we being painted? And all the court is just looking at us with curiosity? Are we the mirror who is looking at Velázquez and the princess in the court? This uncertainty, this duality of perspective, typical of the Baroque, is precisely what Velázquez wanted to achieve here. That this world is a simulacrum, that we live in a theater in preparation to something more important, something more transcendental, which is going to be the afterlife. Velázquez also painted many other interesting characters, like the Count Duke of Olivares in 1636, one of the most wonderful paintings of his oeuvre. The Count Duke of Olivares is characterized because of the importance of the horse as opposed to the human character. Baroque painting tends to basically create a sense of disproportion, of lack of symmetry and of movement at the same time. Everything tends to be transitory. There is a proliferation of forms. The landscape is spread out with light and shade. And Baroque painting tends to aim at this uncertainty, just like in Caravaggio, another important painting by the Italian master of the Baroque, Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, who was very active in the early 17th century in Rome, Naples, and Sicily. The deposition of a cross, where Caravaggio basically proposes that the luminosity, the centrality of the figure of Christ, as opposed to the shades around, is of major transcendence due to the fact that we should not forget that we live in a transitory world, that our real truth lies beyond this precarious life. Caravaggio himself, a self-portrait depicting his strong personality. And another wonderful representative of Baroque art is Rembrandt Hammerzoon van Rijn, just simply known as Rembrandt today. His painting The Syndics of 1662, this Dutch painter represented in an oil and canvas what he called the sampling officials of the Amsterdam Drapers Guild, who was in a kind of realistic, grotesque form of representation. Although Rembrandt is considered part of the Baroque century, he himself created pieces of art that tend to emphasize the more vulgar, the more daily aspects of life. One of his contemporaries, Rubens also represented women and human characters in general with all their specificity. He doesn't idealize the body of women or men in general. This is not exactly the Venus of Botticelli that we have seen before. This is not the linear model. This is a woman with all her details, also in a landscape that is mixed with light and darkness, typical of the proliferation of perspective in the Baroque art in general. In terms of architecture, this beautiful church of San Domenico in Palermo, in Sicily, Italy, is also a very good example of the Baroque art. The abundance of adornment, the proliferation of details, just to remind us that this world is, despite its apotheosis, despite its mundane glories, a transitory place. Most of the Baroque art is directed at reminding us that we should really accept a different order than what we think is the plenitude of daily life. In other representations, we have, for example, the Sixtine Chapel in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, also the interior of a Baroque church in Syracuse, Sicily, the splendor of Versailles. This is the ballroom of one of the main buildings of this wonderful citadel built by Louis XIV in the second half of the 17th century. It tends to exaggerate detail. A trend of the Baroque art is also called the Rococo. And in opposition to this exaggerated style, the neoclassical artists, we have here one of the most important ones, Tiepolo, in his painting Queen Zenobia addressing her soldiers, painted more or less in the late 1720s. We see the return to classical forms. Queen Zenobia is here represented as a Greek heroine, talking to her troops, who are also represented in the form of more or less Greek soldiers. We see more light, we see also action, but there is not as much adornment as in the Baroque art. And another example of neoclassical painting, this is Farewell of Telemachus and Ocaris from 1818, almost a century later, a French painting by Jean-Louis David. As we know, Telemachus was the son of Odysseus, or Ulysses, the hero of the Odyssey. And he was in love with the nymph Eucharis. He is ending the romance because he needs to depart from Ithaca to look for his father. A classical scene, as you can see, the forms are much more linear, more symmetrical. Neoclassic art, as a pendulum, goes back to the ancient Greek and Roman models in order to depict a type of art that is more based in the classical sources and reason on proportion, which is going to open the door to some of the enlightened or illustrated ideas of the 18th century.